Namaste, my friends. Welcome to Jack Colley's Black Book. This is episode number 31. And I want to start today by, I had watched the video from, it was either episode 30 or 29, and I've been having these back spasms, which is just psychologically like it's a pain. Back pain is really difficult because it just catches you off guard. You never know when you're going to get like this shooting pain down your side. And I was at the Hindu temple yesterday, so I am going somewhere with this. But I was at the Hindu temple yesterday morning, and every once in a while, I just really enjoy the incense and the music at the Hindu temple that is just north of the larger city that I live by, and just going through the different representations of, and I don't know if I want to say God, but I want to say Braham, in the same way that I would say Yahweh, the representations of God, the different facets of God. And I was struck by some of the teaching that I heard. One thing very interesting was the idea that of counting my suffering as joy and my joy as suffering. And interestingly enough, when I have these shooting pains down my back, to be able to say, okay, this pain is going to give me appreciation for when my back is healed and it feels better. It's also fascinating to me that whenever I go to practice, to worship with other religions, however you want to define it, I see all of these connections, and the idea of counting your suffering as joy and counting your joy as suffering, to kind of live in the flux, in the yin-yang of pain and health. And knowing that even in the Christian tradition, that this idea that you can consider it pure joy when you are suffering has its roots in the Hindu tradition. And I just love seeing all of the connections. So this will all make sense. Hopefully I'll tie together eventually. But I want to, first of all, I want to correct something that I said, and then we'll return to this other idea. But I want to correct something I said. In the last episode, I had said that this picture right here, only occurred about 50 years ago. And I did the math incredibly wrong. And some of it is I'm still trying to wrap my mind around how, I have lived on this earth for 57 years, and sometimes time just gets away with me. But this picture was indeed actually taken in 1939. So it's still less than a century ago that this picture was taken. And at some point, I think it's going to be important to discuss this idea of the collective unconscious, this Jungian idea of the collective unconscious, that we can go through things in humanity, even from the 1930s and the 1940s, and of course, racism is continuing today, and it can have an impact on our collective conscious and how the behaviors that we choose in 2024, in this day and age. But I wanted to correct that and just, correct the picture date. So this was taken in 1939. So it's older than about 40 or 50 years, I think, is what I said in the last episode. So just to kind of correct that, but to also state that even though this picture is older than I thought, there's still a lot of work to be done with respect to the racism that we all experience and we all act on in different ways. So I just wanted to clarify that. And the other thing I want to do is this. So I wanted to share a few different ideas that I've kind of come up with in dealing with my own racism in my life. And I'm going to continue to make the argument that the initial evaluation of coming into contact with somebody different is natural. When you see somebody with a different skin color, a different environment, when you have these new experiences, you have to make sense of them and that is natural to have to evaluate. It's when we cross the line and actually attach a value to the individual. And that's where I was kind of going with the Hindu and Christian traditions of counting your suffering as joy and counting your joy as suffering, that they are actually one and the same, because we shouldn't attach values. We shouldn't say one is better than the other. We should simply acknowledge that one cannot exist without the other, that we need both. And it's the same thing with this idea of racism, that we come into contact with something new and we have to make sense of it. And it's only when we attach a value to it that we become less than humane, when we say an individual has less value than us or is worth less. So a few things I want to suggest. The first thing I want to suggest is listen to stories. Take some time and read A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to my experience with A Raisin in the Sun, where I made some incredibly inappropriate decisions with an assignment when I was in high school, please give episode, I guess it would have been episode 30, a listen. But listen to the stories, because we can do so much with stories as human beings. We can connect with stories. We can understand them. We remember them better. It's the reason, for example, in the Hindu tradition, I'm currently reading the Upanishads, because these are the stories of Hindu belief. It's the reason that the mystic Christ didn't choose to talk about Christ in a separate type academic way, but we can only tell stories. We can only have poetry, music to express the idea of Yahweh, or the idea of Brahman. So take some chance and listen to the stories, particularly of the experience of Black individuals, Black families, people of African descent. Another thing that I want to talk about here to encourage people to, I guess, heal from their racism, or better yet, to work on getting it out of your life, is to choose wisdom over arrogance. So I was reading, like I said, I was reading in the Upanishads, and I have the book right here, and this is in the Katha Upanishad. And in this particular section, this particular verse of scripture, one might say, it is a teenager named Nachiketa, and Nachiketa is having a discussion with the personification of death. And the personification of death in this particular story is Yama. And Yama finally gives in to Nachiketa and wants to discuss, or how do I say this? Agrees to define the afterlife experience to this teenager who has questions of death. It's really a fascinating Upanishad, and I encourage people to read it. But here's what it says. It says, far apart are wisdom and ignorance. So you have wisdom on one end of the spectrum and ignorance on the other side of the spectrum. The first one, so that is to say wisdom, leads one to self-realization, and the other terms for self-realization could be self-actualization, it could be following your bliss, following your joy, it could be the idea of putting God first in the Christian tradition. We could also define it as heaven, as the experience of heaven in the now. And then the second one, which is ignorance, that one makes one more and more estranged from one's real self. That the more you are ignorant, the more you prevent yourself from actually growing into who you are meant to be. And that would be definitive of hell, the separation of who you were designed or created to be. Now, the reason I bring this up is I'm going to make the argument that this is a choice, that too often we just kind of accept that we are the way that we are. And even in the Christian tradition, sometimes we say, oh, well, you know what, I have a sinful oh gosh, like a sinful, I'm drawing a blank on the word, but a sinful character, that idea of original sin, or this idea that, well, none of us is perfect, and therefore we're just all going to sit around and not be perfect, instead of actually doing some real work on our situation. It is a choice to choose wisdom over ignorance. And I think this is really important. I think this is an important teaching from the Upanishad that helps us to see that we have a lot more control over our future and over our existence and over our interaction with other human beings than we think. You are able to choose your behavior. You're able to choose which side of the spectrum you're on, whether you are on the wisdom side or the ignorant side. And I would like to suggest it, and eventually we'll look more into the science and the psychology of the importance of choosing a behavior. This phrase of fake it till you make it has a lot more power than I think people give it credit for. That you can go through the behaviors of a person with wisdom, and you will eventually become a person of wisdom. You can go through the behaviors and have the characteristics of a person who is accepting of people of different cultures, sexual orientations, different gender expressions, different socioeconomic statuses. That's something that I haven't said enough. But all of these different categories that we tend to put people into, if you fake it, if you say, what does it mean for me to be accepting, and you behave in that way, I believe that you will find more wisdom through your behaviors. It'll actually be self-actualizing. I can't say that, right? Self-actualizing, that if you demonstrate the behavior, the belief and the confidence will follow. So we're going to keep unpacking that more and more as we continue to look at this idea of planting seeds, and the seeds that were planted in us when we were children, and how some of those seeds we just need to let die, and some of those seeds we need to really nourish and take care of and fertilize and reflect on and allow them to grow. So that's where we're going to continue to go. Namaste, my friends, and I look forward to episode 32. All right, namaste.